Good morning, everybody. This is the morning meeting. Dan, Sean, and I to take you through your day. We'll look forward to what's happening. We'll look a little bit backwards today on a few things, but mostly forward as always. Preview what's happening. We'll kick it around, then take your questions. If you're here on the two-way platform, you want to get in on the conversation, please raise your electronic hand. Kenneth has wisely brought a child, so he'll probably get called on. And if you're watching on YouTube, welcome in. You can't ask a question. You can participate in the chat. I was told not to tell you it's a cesspool and not to make it a cesspool, but I'm telling you anyway. Don't put crap in the chat. It's not adult, it's not healthy, and it's not consistent with the ethos of the two-way platform, peace, love, and understanding. We're glad to have your viewership. We don't want your garbage. Thank you for joining, and thanks to those who are here who joined last night. We had our first in real life event downtown in the West Village at the fabled Comedy Cellar, the underground space there. Dan, what were your impressions of the group we convened last night?
It was awesome. It just thank you to everyone who came out, who asked questions both at the mic or on stage and stayed afterwards. And for those of us who were still there at the end, they literally had to turn the lights off, flicker them, and tell us to get out. It was that much fun. So thank you, everybody.
Sean, you've done your share of live events around the globe. How was last night?
It was fantastic. Love the audience. Great venue. For those wondering, Dan's smile is just as electric in person as it is on video. So it's worth seeing in person. It's that magnificent.
We got to meet a lot of members of the community last night. Dan and Sean got to meet. Sean got to meet my son. Very exciting day for the whole two-way community. And again, we're grateful for people who came out. We will be doing more events. We've gotten lots of questions. Yes, we'll do events in lots of different cities. If you'd like us to come to your city and you can guarantee us you'll build a giant crowd, sure, we'll show up. So look forward to more announcements about that. Tonight, on Two-Way Tonight, we'll continue our The Future series with Dan, who's our guest there.
Representative Torres, who is no shrinking violet when it comes to what he thinks the party needs to do going forward, which is awesome.
Yeah, we'll have a positive talk about the future of the party. If you're out there as a member of the audience, we have lots of members of this community who are very liberal, very progressive. And sometimes we hear from you folks, you don't feel welcome. You don't feel that we're giving enough voice to the liberal and the progressive point of view. Guess what? Raise your hand and come on and talk. The liberal progressive wing of the Democratic Party is a huge part of the Democratic Party, represents tens of millions of people. Bernie Sanders, AOC, many of their leaders are prominent voices and have a lot of power and influence and ideas, as I said, that a lot of people believe in. So if you're progressive, you're very welcome here. And we hope you'll join in this morning. Hope you'll join tonight to talk to Congressman Torres. Also tonight on Two-Way Tonight, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, my friend, one of the best pollsters in America, Ann Seltzer, who had one bad poll, because that happens to great pollsters. She's been unfairly maligned, her motives, her methods, etc. And we'll be here. I'll talk to her briefly, and she'll take your questions, and she'll walk through whatever people want to hear. But this platform is against people being attacked, canceled, destroyed unfairly. And what's happening with Ann's just not fair. So she's my friend. She's also a great professional, and look forward to talking to her tonight. All right. On the schedule today, President Biden, nothing public. He's getting his daily brief sometime this morning. The vice president switches it up a little bit. She's in Hawaii, no public event scheduled. Donald Trump is having transition meetings in Mar-a-Lago. Don't know exactly what he's doing, but I do believe he'll be talking to at least two Treasury Secretary prospects. And don't be surprised of two things. One, if it gets announced today, and if two, later on this program, we tell you who the Treasury Secretary is likely to be, just as yesterday we told you who the Commerce and Education Secretaries were likely to be. This is not just a place for great conversation, but we're breaking transition news, and we'll do that shortly. J.D. Vance on Capitol Hill, reportedly taking Matt Gaetz around for some courtesy calls with senators. Could be interesting. Interesting to see which senators they choose and what that does to his nomination prospects. Also on Capitol Hill, the Senate's voting on a bunch of Bernie Sanders proposals on Israel. Be interesting to see there. Amongst those testifying before various Senate committees today, Pete Buttigieg, the head of FEMA, Deanne Criswell, and Secretary of State Tony Blinken. House testimony includes these bold-faced names: Alejandro Mayorkas, FBI Director Christopher Wray, who Sean says is a goner, and Xavier Becerra. All very exciting. All right, gentlemen, Matt Gaetz, every day we talk about this. I am thinking now less likely to make it. I think if he makes it to committee, he'll be passed on the floor, but I'm not sure he's going to make it to a hearing. And I'll tell you in part why. Let's put up the graphics, folks. ABC News has been the leading organization in breaking information about what the Gaetz accusers say and what evidence they have. Here is something that ABC published. This is the Venmo records of Matt Gaetz. The two column you see is highly redacted, but these are the payments to the women who are accusing Matt Gaetz of paying them for sex. These are not underage women, but they were young women. And you can see the most interesting thing here, if you're a journalist or a human being, is the notes column. For those of you not familiar with Venmo, you can optionally include a little note when you pay someone through Venmo, when you send them money. And amongst the things in the notes column there, thank you for highlighting, being my friend, being awesome, just because, travel, flight plus extra for you. Next page. This notes column's maybe even better for those interested in interesting things. Car deductible, gift, refreshments, love you, cartridges, travel, hi, enjoy, exclamation points. So, Sean, Matt Gaetz is apparently telling people there's nothing else coming out. These charges are false. He's going to be confirmed. People at Mar-a-Lago are being realistic. Some say he may not make it, but they're not inclined to give up. Where does the Gaetz nomination stand as far as you see it now?
So Gaetz has two things going for him that I think most nominees don't. One is his personal willingness to fight. As I've said before, a lot of times when things come down, you worry about yourself, your reputation, your family. He's got an amazing wife that stands firmly behind him. And he's got the support, secondly, of the president. Those two things allow you to stay and fight much longer than a normal nominee who would have cut and run a long time ago. So I think that, again, this gets back to things may not look good. They may look unseemly, but are they, like, you look at that, now it makes me feel a lot better that I never put, I try to put some kind of stupid emoji because it always wants you to put something in the Venmo thing. And I'm like, I don't know what I want to put, but I feel a lot better what I've written now. And so you can explain away a lot of that crap, right? And come up with some excuse. And unless somebody can say, here's the exact, here's the voice of you saying it or whatever. And I get, we talked about this a little last night. I think what we're trying to do on this program is explain to you the process, not defend it, not defend somebody but is to give you a sense of the process and the analysis that goes into it. So for those reasons, as long as the president of the United States stays behind him, and his answer yesterday going into that SpaceX event was resoundingly firm. No, I'm not giving up on him. So I still think he stays and fights. I think after a day in D.C., we'll get a sense. Do these senators say we're concerned, or do they say hell no? And those are two different things that J.D. Vance will go back to the president with.
Yeah. So, Dan, as you know, nominees rarely get defeated on the floor by the president's own party. Often they're pressured to withdraw. And as Sean suggested, they withdraw because their families just don't want to go through what it's going to take. But if Gaetz fights through, history suggests if he can get a floor vote, he can win. If you look at the committee, I don't think it's impossible that he could be voted out favorably by the committee. So what's your sense of Gaetz's chances of confirmation?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Sean said. I think they will get a sense today going around the Capitol. I'm going to be curious if both Vance or Gaetz speaks to the media. Reporters are all over the hallways. Neither of them historically have no comment, and where does this stand, let's say, at the end of the day tomorrow? If he were going to withdraw, Friday night of Thanksgiving weekend or Wednesday night next week would, might be a convenient time. But, I could also see where, this is all coming out. We're about to go into the holidays. Congress is going to come back, afterwards, and there's going to be some stuff on their plate in terms of the budget and like, what are they going to do? And I could see where, if there's not another drip, more information that keeps building, that he kind of can plow through this. Because as Sean says, as long as the president's with them and there isn't, 4 or let's say 3 senators come out firmly against him, so then everyone's going to start wondering, is there one more out there? I still think he could get through this.
Two things reported overnight on the Hegseth nomination. One is he has a Sherpa, a former Capitol Hill senior staffer. So having a named Sherpa who's got record on the Hill is good. And the other is, I think the Washington Post reported that senators say if the personal allegations that have come out don't seem disqualifying, that they're going to confirm him even despite questions about his management experience. And if that's the case, I think he well may be confirmed. Sean, you want to comment on that one?
No, I mean, I agree. I stand by all five right now.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Economic team. So Lutnick to Commerce, which we told you yesterday. Now, there's two guys who need jobs, Peter Navarro and Bob Lighthizer. I don't believe either of them is going to be Treasury Secretary, and I don't believe either of them is going to be head of the NEC. I could be wrong, but I don't think they are. So one issue is finding jobs for those two guys, both of whom would like jobs. Okay. Then the question is who's getting Treasury, who's getting NEC? Sean and I have both heard that a very strong candidate for Treasury is Mr. Warsh. John, do you know him personally?
No, I know of him.
Okay.
By reputation.
Okay, most of you don't know him. So let's look at some video of someone who's reportedly a top candidate, maybe the top candidate for Treasury right now. Most of you have never heard him speak. Take a listen.
They said for a long time, you'll recall a few years ago, they were for flexible average inflation targeting. So inflation, when it was at 1.7, they said, we'll get it a little higher. We'll try to bounce around 2. They seem to have gotten rid of that idea without replacing it. Then they said for a long time, what really matters is core PCE. That's what we should focus on. About a year ago, they said, well, the best measure of inflation is now what they created a new category. And they said it was core services X housing. Well, that's in the 4s. Previously, Janet Yellen, and embedded in the Fed model, said what really matters is wages. And so we need wages to run at 3%, which is consistent with inflation running around 2. Wages are running around 4. All this is to say they don't seem to have a serious theory of inflation that's theoretical and empirical. It's not obvious that they acknowledge what their role is in prices. Instead, it has something to do with wars and pandemics.
Sean, if you were his media consultant, what would you say about that?
I mean, it's
how is he as a communicator?
I don't think he's the most effective guy in the world, but I don't know that that's what Donald Trump is looking for. He wants somebody that's going to buy into the tariff agenda. Warsh has a huge background. He has served as the NEC in the White House, so he's got that background. He was a Federal Reserve Board of Governor member. I mean, he's a Stanford grad, right? I mean, Trump talks about central casting, so he might not communicate perfectly. He presents well. He's got a pedigree background. And I think right now the word I'm getting is that Trump really wants somebody who is not going to, I've relayed this story in the past, specifically on DOD matters, where we would get into these briefings and people would start telling the president why he shouldn't do what he's committed to doing to the voters during the campaign and why he shouldn't do this. And I think he wants to make sure that his Treasury Secretary isn't somebody who starts pontificating about why tariffs really aren't the right thing and immediately pushes back. And so the question for Warsh is, yeah, you got the pedigree. Have you bought in on the agenda?
Dan, what do you think of Warsh, assuming that was your first exposure to him?
I actually think that was pretty good considering the audience. I mean, he was on CNBC talking about markets to people, who totally that is what they want to hear. If that was the speech at the Kiwanis Club in Green Bay, I would probably say we need to reevaluate how we talk about this. But I actually thought he was pretty calm. He was pretty measured, and again, for that crowd, he made a pretty good case. And I think what Sean, just said is right. He wants people who are on the team who are going to be able to go out and execute what he wants, which is not unreasonable for a president to feel that way. And he seems like he's knowledgeable, so seems pretty good.
Here's what I'd say: if you're going to Ladbrokes with a $5 and you want to bet on the economic team, right now I would put $4 on Warsh for Treasury, Scott Bessent for NEC. However, I would take the other dollar and I'd flip them, and I'd put Warsh as head of NEC and Scott Bessent at Treasury. That's where I think it stands.
I think look, the thing that it matters is at the end of the day, we saw this with the AG pick. It can all come to a head, and suddenly, it's almost like flipping a coin. And I watched Stephen Mnuchin during the 2016 cycle really lobby for Secretary of the Treasury brilliantly, by the way. And there was it was a very similar situation, and he walked out and was like, "Put the release out." I mean, it was sort of like, let's bank this thing quick.
It could go to Rowan. It could end up being Rowan at Treasury and Lighthizer at NEC. Although I don't think so, but it could. All right. One more thing about the Trump transition. Okay. There's some polling out that was highlighted by
Patrick.
What's that guy's name? Patrick Ruffini about the Trump transition. And there's 2 polls out that suggest it's popular. Okay. So I'm just putting on the table. Could this be another case? You can put the polling up just to show. It shows that Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, is like is the best fave unfave. A little hard to read, but they tested everybody, and Kennedy's got the best fave unfave. So if you're inside the Beltway or you're part of the resistance, what are you thinking about the Trump transition? 5 doom nominees. Trump is invisible. When he comes out, he sounds like a jerk. Goes to some sports thing, whatever, right? And the daily coverage seems negative. I think it's possible, putting on the table. Dan, you first. If you're a normal person, what are you seeing? Trump surrounded by Bobby Kennedy, very popular guy right now. Elon Musk, legendary figure for many. Tulsi Gabbard, very well liked by many. And talking about reform, talking about unity, talking about the Avengers super team. Dr. Oz, not popular in Washington, New York in some circles, but huge following. So is it possible that the Trump transition in polling that's come out is rated positively because, in fact, normal people think it is going well?
Yeah, I also just think normal people don't pay attention to this. Like, this is a process, like classic Beltway set of stories. He won the election. So far, no nominee has come out, kind of against or he hasn't changed course where he's saying, I'm going to do X. And now he's like, and now we're going to do Y with this person. Like, I think the average person just says he won. He's putting in charge people who he kind of, are going to execute his agenda. I do agree with you on RFK. At the end of the day, he's a Kennedy. And I think for the average person, that is a positive move by Trump, like a bipartisan move. And I think, look, some more stories about, again, alleged stories about engagement with hookers and drug use. And we'll see if that doesn't start to change things. I did see on the poll, Matt Gaetz had the lowest favorable, highest unfavorable amongst that list of people. But I think the average person there's been no news for them since the election.
Mark, one of the things there's 2 things that, as Dan was saying, first on the coverage of these, it's sort of like for movie buffs, when I hear the Emmys get announced or whatever, I'm like, God, I haven't seen one. There's most of the time I haven't heard of one. I think for most people, they're kind of like, outside of RFK, maybe Dr. Oz, a lot of this is just sort of like, are you enacting the agenda? And I don't really know some of these names. But I've been writing down, we keep talking about the names that Trump has announced. I'm actually equally intrigued by the names that haven't been announced. Robert Wilkie, Chad Wolf, Matt Whitaker, Rick Grinnell, Brooke Rollins, Ben Carson, Chris Miller, former acting DOD, Peter Navarro. Like, where are these guys going to? They have been loyal to the president. They have been figuring out policy for the last 4 years. Where are they? I know that they've been working, that I can't speak for everybody, obviously, about a desire to serve. But these individuals, I'm sort of intrigued by where are they in the conversation?
Right. Well, some of them, as you know, haven't gotten the jobs they wanted. And so I think are reconsidering. Some of them may end up as ambassadors, which is a place to go. Some of them could end up as deputy secretary. Some could end up in senior White House jobs. A lot of White House jobs left to pass out. Right. So
yes and no.
I mean, some that might fit for those folks. I don't believe I've gotten some texts about this because people who watch the show are good sources sometimes. I don't believe that Senator Haggerty is in the running for Treasury Secretary, even though he was touted as the front runner by a news organization called, I think, Axios, said that he's the front runner. My sources don't think that. My sources say he's out of the picture. Despite spending the day with the president yesterday, I was told that was to let him down easy as opposed to consider him for the job. That's what I'm hearing. All right. Another Trump thing that I want to do, two Democratic things, and then go to your questions. If you'd like to get in the conversation, please raise your hand. Let's get some super liberals in here to talk about what you think, please. All right. Michael Wolff is a writer who has been given extraordinary access in the past by Donald Trump himself and by senior Trump officials. Sean, you ever do an interview with Michael Wolff for a book?
I don't know that I'd call it an interview. I was introduced to him briefly.
Okay.
But
probably turned it into a chapter.
Anyway, yes.
Anyway,
you just gave me PTSD. Thank you.
There'll be books written about the campaign. Most of them will be lightly sourced and rushed. Some will be good. A lot of things happened in this campaign that have never been reported on both sides, because these were the two least leaky presidential campaigns, I think, of all time. There was very little reporting in the daily coverage of this person thinks this, that person thinks this. There's disagreements about tactics and strategy because these two campaigns were not leaky. And it's often the case that the way you tell these stories for history is through deeply reported books. One person who writes books about campaigns, Michael Wolff, is often accused by sources of not deeply reporting, but simply putting some stuff in a book. So apparently he's planning to do another book, and he's been contacting all the Trump people. So I have seen a lot in my day as an author of books about presidencies and presidential campaigns, and as a student of them. I've seen a lot of how the campaign, particularly if they're winning and they're going into the White House, how they kind of organize to say, are we going to cooperate or not? And sometimes there's a yes, sometimes there's a no, sometimes it's a case by case. Some people will, some people won't. Here's the extraordinary letter that Team Trump put out this morning that, again, as a student of this, I just find it hilarious. Trump campaign statement on new Michael Wolff book. The senior staff of the campaign collectively issued the following statement. Quote, a number of us have received inquiries from the disgraced author, Michael Wolff, whose previous work can only be described as fiction. He is a known peddler of fake news who routinely concocts situations, conversations, and conclusions that never happened. As a group, we've decided not to respond to his bad faith inquiries, and we encourage others to completely disregard whatever nonsense he eventually publishes. Consider this our blanket response to whatever he writes. And as you can see, it's signed by an all-star team of senior Trump campaign officials. Sean.
I wish I had known that.
What do you think of that letter, Sean, or that statement?
So we did that a couple times in the White House, where we get a call. I specifically remember a couple times in Politico where there was an event that demonstrably didn't happen, and we would issue a statement saying everybody in the room sort of disputes this thing. This is them getting on the record, right? And I think this is clearly a sign. Last time, I think when the first Michael Wolff book came out, President Trump met with him. And I think clearly the tone has changed where they want to publicly demonstrate that we are not talking to him. It wasn't us. They want to go on record so that when Michael Wolff comes out with a book that says so-and-so did so-and-so, they can go back and it's like, here, Your Honor, we enter this into evidence. Here is our statement from a year ago. We said none of us were talking to him. We denounced it. This to me is more show for President Trump to say we're not talking to him. And my guess is at his directive.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other challenge always is junior staffers are flattered often by the calls to participate, on background. And once you start getting information and then you roll up to people, I mean, that's when people often, even if they don't want to cooperate, end up doing it because they're like, wait, you have half the story. Let me fill in the rest. Or somebody throws you under the bus for a decision that didn't go well and you want to defend yourself. And that's how kind of everyone ends up talking. And so to your point, Sean, this could be their attempt to, if the top people don't talk and the bottom people did, they'll try to, muddy this up when the book comes out.
Yeah, I mean, to Dan's point, just so everyone understands it, this is how it goes. Hey, I was wondering if you could spend a few minutes with me because I have a couple stories about you, and most of them make you look like an idiot. So if you can give me 5 minutes, I can let you respond. And so you have a choice then. Do I get to say I never spoke to Michael Wolff, which is a tactic, or is it I want to defend my honor before, 50,000 people read it in a book and a bunch of talk shows have a discussion about it.
I urge those who worked for the Harris and Biden campaigns and for those who worked for the Trump campaign, only cooperate with authors of integrity. That's what I would say. All right, two things about the Democrats.
Case 3, coming to a bookseller.
Two things about the Democrats deriving from New York Times stories. First, Dan, a story about it was a Politico story about the DNC chair race.
Politico has a piece.
Politico,
yep.
sorry. All right, so that's Politico. So the Politico story says the Democrats are thinking they need maybe a new leadership. So that could be younger people. It could be people who are more outsiders, or it could be people who have kind of tactical ideas about reaching people on TikTok. How fundamental do you see this divide as, and do you think in the end it will be someone who's more of a new generation in any of those areas or not?
Yeah, I think the bigger thing, I mean, I think age is always something that'll be talked about just because it inherently says new and fresh. But the bigger thing, I think, is this idea of tactics. And it's remarkable that Trump is, at 77, 78 years old, has been perhaps the most nimble, culturally savvy from a communication standpoint president, maybe since Reagan or even greater than Reagan. And I think you have, with these older members, Schumer, Pelosi, others, when I was a chief of staff in the mid 2010s, I can remember Facebook reaching out and saying, we want to do meetings with new House members to talk about how to use the platform, both for governing and for campaigning. And the number of members who were just like, no, like we do press releases, like all the traditional stuff. And even today, like when you look at the way the party responds to a lot of stuff, it is like, we're going to hold a press conference. We're going to, do it at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's not a very nimble party. And whether it's social media or the use of podcasters and other things, I think what you're hearing is this new generation that is coming up in the ranks that is just like, how is it that we're supposed to be the party of young voters? And we always thought we were close to Silicon Valley and Hollywood. And yet Donald Trump at 78 is the most nimble and savvy, communicator there is, understands pop culture, understands kind of what's next. He's very willing to test things out, to try something new if it's hot, if it's cool, like if it's going to create buzz. And by the way, like he himself communicates directly with people. And we still have, our party, whether it's Biden or, you don't hear Chuck Schumer firing off tweets to get in conversations. It's always like, we're going to speak at 10 a.m. in the, Hart lobby and do it the old fashioned way. And so I think the party is craving a new leader that will modernize capabilities, because the leader is not going to create the message. Candidates will create the message, but they need to put the infrastructure and stuff in place.
Sean, let me ask you.
I love Dan's comment. I just think it's funny that, if you had asked me 10 years ago which party was going to embrace the new media culture and be speaking, I would have not put money on my party. I think Donald Trump, not only, Trump himself, but the age at which he has embraced new media in a way, both social media, the podcast, long form, independent media. It's amazing, because I would have put money on the Democrats doing that before my own party. And I think you're right. It's just a fascinating dynamic that is existing in politics right now.
Well, he's always been a student of pop culture. Like he's always loved it, craved it, wanted to know and be in it. And that's a testament to Trump.
Yeah. So these campaigns, as I said, they didn't cooperate with profiles very often. Susie and Chris did a little bit with one reporter, but for the most part, they didn't. They also weren't very transparent about their technology, right? In 2008, for instance, the Obama people were very ostentatious about, we know how to use the latest technology. And most cycles, there's a sense amongst political journalists and people in politics, which party has the technological edge? One of the things I don't know the answer to is, why did the Harris field operation not propel her to victory? It may have been very successful. It's possible without that operation, she would have lost worse. But I know virtually nothing about their technology, both at the campaign and at the DNC versus the RNC. Sean, do you have a sense, is part of the Democrats' problem that the RNC and the Trump campaign have better analytics in terms of information about voters and technology to reach voters? Or is it not known to you either?
So So I've been, I mean, ever since 2016, I've been very bullish on how we've embraced data, the use of it,
Yeah.
and opened up our ecosystem. Prior to 16, we didn't want anybody to look inside the kimono. It was all about making sure that we controlled everything. And the RNC, to its credit, and the party writ large, has allowed the flow of data. It's an organization called Data Trust now, which is sort of this massive ecosystem. And honestly, they've given a lot. They've taken a big leap of faith. And I talked to a lot of guys in the campaign, and there was a lot of like, I hope we haven't gone too far. But they were willing to walk you through what they're doing and opening up a lot to the third parties. But if you recall, I had James Blair on my show, the political director, months ago. And I remarked on this show that when I asked him specifically about the third parties, he said, some of them are doing a good job, some of them aren't, and we know who they are, and we're holding them accountable. And I asked him the same question about 2 months later, and he said it's that accountability was so critical. And I think that James Blair is probably the biggest unsung hero of this campaign cycle.
I agree with that. All right, we're going to skip the New York Times story because I want to start bringing folks in. And again, as always, please raise your hand. Or if you've got your hand raised, I call on you. Please say where you are, who you supported for president, what's on your mind. Jerry, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm from Europe, in fact, from Finland to be specific.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining.
Yes, and then I've been a student of American politics for a long time, and then there was a little bit of a theme that reminded me of European politics, and that was an maybe an unexpected coalition building in this presidential election cycle. RFK Jr. joining Trump campaign, and then Trump also going to the Liberal Party conference or whatever that was, and then a moment, please.
No, bring him in.
We love kids, all continents.
Yes.
You would have gotten on sooner.
It's a snowman.
Oh, look at that little man. How old is he?
Yes, he's 4. He's 4.
All right.
And there's his big sis. Anyhow,
Yes,
this
sir.
coalition politicking, I might believe that Trump couldn't have won without the RFK Jr. At least some polling indicated that. And then I would like to ask from Dan that is this something that is this coalition going to hold for the GOP in future, or is this kind of a one-off that in the 4 years' time RFK Jr. will go probably, or those kind of teams will go to the Democratic Party, and the party goes back to some kind of another base?
Yeah.
And maybe for Dan, I would like to know if this kind of a method of integrating third parties and having this kind of a coalition dialect probably maybe going to be a way of Democratic Party gaining grounds in the future.
Awesome questions. Thank you for that. Sean, then Dan.
I'll let Dan. I mean, this is directed to him, so I'll let Dan go.
Okay.
Is that your daughter there?
Yes.
What's her name?
Lyra. Haluatko tulla vilkuttaa?
All right, Dan. I've had.
Look, I think I agree with you. I think RFK's vote was material. I think 2-3% was the difference in some of these states. It's a great question. Can Trump and not Trump, but can the Republican Party, because Trump won't be on the ballot again, they have an opportunity to bring these people in and keep them in their tent for the foreseeable future. I remember when Barack Obama won in 2008, Democrats had the same dreams, right? We won Indiana, Ohio, Florida. Like, could we realign the country? Could these suburban voters, that Republican voters that finally seemed open to the party for the first time since 92 and 96, stay with us? We did our best to drive them right back to the Republican Party and kind of have struggled, on and off. I think one of the great tragedies is that the Democrats drove Kennedy out of the party and made him an independent. And then when it was obvious that he still had a following, rather than extend the hand, and he reached out to Harris to meet, who refused to do it, that we drove him into the hands of Donald Trump and Tulsi Gabbard, who we ran out of the party. And we've lived in fear of Jill Stein from 2016. So I hope we, for years, saw ourselves as the big tent party, And now we are seen as the rigid, narrow, ideological party. And I can't believe it. Donald Trump and the GOP is seen as the big tent party where all are welcome.
I do think that Trump is an anomaly. Like, I mean, the ability for him to talk about, to bring in these different people. I mean, think about it. Sean O'Brien, a Teamster, spoke at our convention. If you had told me again, I mean, the shock that you'd kind of just woken somebody out of a coma and said, okay, let me fill you in. There's a Teamster that spoke openly without endorsing the nominee at the convention. These are the different people. And the nominee is now kind of wavering a little on life issues. I would have been like, no way. So Trump truly is a political unicorn. It is not going to happen again. And the question is, who capitalizes on it post-Trump 2028? I think JD is probably the only one that in an elected capacity that can do that, though.
Jerry, thank you for joining. Thanks for bringing the kids. Grateful to you. Please come back. Michelle, welcome in. Thanks for joining. Tell folks where you are, who you supported for president, if you wish, and what's on your mind.
Thank you for having me. I am in Virginia. I'm a Trump voter. I had some kind of reservations, I think a lot of people did, just about his behavior and, some of the incendiary things that he says. But I think overall, it was really the policies that sort of, drove it home for me. And to be fair, I was a Trump voter, kind of a reluctant Trump voter for the last several cycles. So, but at the end of the day, I liked where his policies were coming from. And so that was the reason for my vote. My question is really kind of goes back to the Gaetz conversation. I find it extraordinarily fascinating. He is, a very kind of heated and charged individual. And I was listening to Megyn Kelly's kind of reports, a very in-depth report on some of the allegations against him. And I guess my thought is, I'm just kind of curious what the general consensus is on people who, like, how do people feel about this, the allegations against him and the behavior? Because I kind of have a generally low opinion of all politicians. So I'm not very surprised that he might have disgusting behavior. It's really, what is he going to do to, advance, whatever goals Trump has in mind? And that's really kind of, I don't really care strongly either way, to be honest, but it's not really the behaviors that are sort of, the thing for me. That's not the way I live my life, but I don't really expect politicians to be upstanding, citizens anymore. I'm not sure why, but just
leaving the personal allegations aside,
yeah,
how do you feel about him as a potential attorney general?
I'd like to know more about how he handles how he's questioned by the Senate. There is a certain appeal to the fact that he just doesn't seem to care what is thrown at him. And, he just is kind of like, can go in there on fire and he doesn't, it's this impenetrable kind of thing. And so I think that is the appeal for Trump. And I do think that there is I kind of get it. I understand that he's willing to throw bombs and take bombs. And I think there's a little bit of this fighter mentality that I think is interesting to him. So again, I don't think he's an upstanding human probably, but I'm not surprised by that, frankly. So
yeah.
I
Michelle,
my one
super
question,
interesting, but go ahead.
My one question, was about the recess appointments. There's a lot of kind of discussion about recess appointments. Can you address the concerns or controversy around recess appointments, given the fact that it's been a really common practice for presidents for the last 40 years? What is the issue that people are having?
It hasn't been common with cabinet appointments. It's been common with other jobs. And there's two ways for him to do this in theory. One is with the 50 votes of the Senate adjourning and agreeing to do it. I don't think they'll do that, because if they can get 50 votes to let him do recess appointments, they'll vote to confirm people. And then he can try to do it with the help of the House without the Senate. And I think if he does that, he'll alienate more than 10 Republican senators very profoundly, and it'll hurt their ability to get things done with them. And two, I think, although I almost never predict what the courts will do, I think the courts will almost certainly strike it down. So he may put someone in briefly, but the courts will overturn it. So I've said this before. I think this is a non-issue. I don't understand why they're even touting it. It's only going to alienate Republicans. Again, it's been done in the past, but not for cabinet appointments. and typically not when your party's in the majority in the Senate. Sean.
So there's a couple things. First of all, there's two basic differences in recess appointments. One is you can name someone as an acting and go in. Then there is this controversial idea where the president can adjourn Congress if they disagree on the time. And Scalia opined on this, basically saying that he believed back in the day that this was meant to occur between terms. So Congress adjourns, sine die, from the 110th to the 111th, and therefore the president needs the ability to do this. I do think the court might push back, but I disagree with Mark in one way. I think that if the Democrats make this difficult and give the excuse to the Republicans, where what they would do is you kind of like traffic jam all of these guys together and say, we're going to push through 5. Right, we'll adjourn, and it gives the Senate, some of these guys who don't maybe want to vote for Matt Gaetz, who don't want to vote for someone else, whoever else, right, to be able to say, I didn't vote for him. The Democrats made this difficult, and so the president has a right to do this, and so I think there's a scenario because a lot of politicians, I hate to tell you this, don't have a big backbone, and I think what they want to do is that they can say, I didn't vote for Gaetz. I never did. But the Democrats put us in a situation if it comes to that. The last thing I would just say, Michelle, is it's funny that the way you brought up the Gaetz thing. After 2016, we had during the 2016 campaign, that Access Hollywood tape. And I was amazed how many women I spoke to where I was like, how are you taking this? And they go, Sean, all you guys say this kind of stuff. And I'd be like, wait a second. No, we all don't say this. But there's a perception about conversations and actions that happen among politicians, sometimes true, sometimes not. And I think you express the sentiment of a lot of people who say, look, do your job. I never thought a lot of you were upstanding people anyway. And, but as long as your policies are good, then I'm not here to judge you, your character. And I think I have been intrigued by how that shift has occurred so societally over the last 5 to 10 years. But I think you express a sentiment that I hear more and more, which is, yeah, I get it. I don't like it. I don't agree with it, but we're not hiring to be, my priest.
Yeah,
Dan.
accurate.
Yeah, I mean, when I was a fundraiser, this was an issue we used to have where candidates would say, I'm not going to take PAC money. I'm not going to take money from corporations. And we fundraisers would argue, if you ask the average person on the street, do you think one person gives $1 million or 1 million people give $1? Nobody knows the difference. They think everyone's corrupt. They think everyone's bought. So you gain nothing. Maybe you gain in a primary, but like you're just tying hands behind your back. So what you're saying kind of doesn't surprise me a little bit. I wish it weren't true. And by the way, most politicians are not crooks. But there are some bad apples. As far as the confirmation goes, look, the Senate's job is to advise and consent. And if you're going to absolve yourself of that, it's not a good precedent. I mean, there's a lot of talk about taking power back from the presidency that Congress has given it. And, when it's a Democrat, Republicans are really big on this when there's a Democrat in the White House. But to Mark's point, Republicans have the majority. Like the fact that they're even talking about all these different ways to do it, like, yeah, Sean said, they don't want to vote and they don't want to have to do this. But, if they end up going that route, it's a precedent that you're setting that you can just, recess Congress and get your appointments in there. And we'll see what happens.
Michelle, can I ask, not specific, but what area of Virginia do you live in?
I am outside of Charlottesville.
Okay. And do you think that the sentiment that you're expressing about Gaetz, I know we used to do this with the election, but when you talk to folks, is it a similar thing or like someone asked the other day, I think it was Megan saying a lot of women, is that the sentiment that you have about politicians and how they're viewed, is that sort of similar to what you think a lot of your colleagues at work or whatever agree with, or do you find yourself isolated in that thought?
I work in an institution, shall we say, where I don't bring up politics at all, particularly being a Republican.
Sometimes in academia, I'm reading between the lines. Charlotte. Okay.
So, I mean, again, I wish that our politicians were more upstanding and reliable, but I think that, with the exposure, even of social media and the way kind of, people, things were kind of hidden for a long, long time. And now that everything is a little bit more out there with, the different kind of forms of media and Twitter and everything else, it just seems like, there are enough politicians that are kind of the bad apples that Dan was talking about, that at the end of the day, I don't even know who's the good guy anymore. It's so hard to know, unfortunately. So,
well, and
Michelle, how'd you find out? Go ahead, Dan.
I was going to say, I think one of the things, because I hear this from Democrats all the time, that's the problem that Democrats don't want to kind of admit to is, for years, people have had affairs in life, and members of Congress have been caught with staff and secretaries, et cetera. And it's like, well, that's small and traditional, but paying $500 to a 20-year-old is like different. And, our lies are small and Trump's lies are big. And to the average person, relations with someone other than your partner is relations with someone other than your partner. A lie is a lie, and it kind of just becomes white noise. And Democrats, I think, have had a hard time accepting that, and they want to say, like, we're better, they're worse. And I think it misses the mark.
Michelle, how did you find out about two-way?
I believe it was through Megyn Kelly's show. I do listen to that podcast a fair amount, and really, really enjoyed it. I try to kind of tag in. This is the first time I've been on this show kind of live, so I'm shocked that you guys called me. I was not ready for this. But I do listen after the fact a lot, and I cannot express how much I appreciate this platform. Everybody's really excellent insights across the board, from the Democrats, the Republicans, and everybody. And Dan in particular, love your insights, love your bright smile. And I really do think that you bring a sensibility to the Democrat Party that I think we've been craving, because I feel like the general media, it's just been lost. And then I also love the fact that you have Sean Spicer's book on your bookshelf, which is really nice.
Michelle, thanks for joining. Come back regularly. Enjoyed having you on. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. All right. Jeffrey, come on in. Tell folks where you are, who you supported for president. What's on your mind, please?
Oh, I think you're muted.
One more time.
You're muted, Jeffrey. Still muted.
All right, Jeffrey, keep trying. Let's while we wait for Jeffrey to unmute, Lisa, come back in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, you're a Harris supporter, and what's on your mind, please.
Hey.
There you go.
Good morning. Harris supporter. And my question, I guess I just wanted to comment quickly on the discussion that just occurred and what Michelle said. I actually also feel very similarly in terms of how people view politicians and all of that. The one thing that I would say is that there is a difference between infidelity and being unfaithful to your spouse and underage statutory rape types of things. And I, having said that, I understand there's been, no process and there's been no real proof or a process around that. But I just kind of wanted to say that there is a distinction between those two situations.
100%. We don't disagree.
Thank you. My question is actually for all four of you. I wanted to go back to the confirmation process. I feel pretty strongly that all of these candidates are going to be confirmed. And I think that minus some sort of criminal prosecution of Gaetz and this underage situation, which I don't foresee happening, my question really is, if you think that there is a potential for Gaetz or any of the other controversial five not to be confirmed, I'm really curious about which specific Republican senators you think would actually, in a public vote no on these folks, considering Trump's picks.
So Murkowski and Collins
Right.
could consistently be no votes. I think McConnell could be a no vote on some of these. I think that Tom Tillis could be a no vote. I think Shelley Moore Capito could be a no vote. I think Joni Ernst could be a no vote. John, who am I leaving out?
Those would be the four. The first four are at the top of my list. The new senator from Utah is a wild card that we'll have to see where he lands. But I would actually, if you'd have to see a lot more for Ernst and Shelley to vote no. I mean, I think that it would end up being a much bigger vote. I feel like once that dam breaks, it's going to be a lot bigger. My guess is that you don't see Shelley or Joni Ernst vote no unless the number ends up being 20 or the guy or the nominee pulls out. The first four you mentioned are the obvious characters.
Yeah. Lisa, I think one big question is what John Thune does, right? He's totally untested in this role. And if he's talking to his members, he's hearing a lot of concern, not just about Matt Gaetz, but about some of the other controversial five. And is he going to tell his members to vote their conscience? Or is he going to say, through, in coordination with the Trump operation, this is a party vote?
I mean, Collins and Tillis are up for re-election in 26. I mean, that is a very interesting dynamic because a vote against one of these five is probably good for their general election brand. But they've, Collins at least has been able to avoid those primaries, stake her claim to the middle, and not let a Democrat get there.
Collins will not lose the primary. Tillis could.
Yes. That's true. Tillis has to worry about his flank in North Carolina. I mean, Collins people get. The president gets Collins, right? I mean, Susan Collins actually knows how to navigate this. She is, unlike Murkowski, she doesn't go dance on the grave. It's like Susan Collins may not be the strongest conservative, but she's a very adept politician.
The only thing I wonder about is the political world has changed a lot in 6 years in the Republican Party. And I hear you, and I totally agree that if anyone could do it, it's her. And I think you're right. Trump has an understanding of what she needs to do. But I will be curious if she can, tap dance, because I think once you get past McConnell and Murkowski and maybe Collins, to your point, who those brave soldiers are, I have a real question. Any of them will do it.
As do I, Dan. I will believe it when I see it, I guess is what I'm going to say about that. But to your point, Mark, about Thune, what is your sense? Like, what is everybody's sense about which way he's going to go?
Too soon to say. But I say this not with no disrespect to him, but to respect to Senator McConnell. He doesn't have McConnell's ability to read the room, to read the conference, to read the country. He's just not tested. Look, I agree with Sean in general that if Shelley Moore Capito or Ernst is voting no, there's a lot more people who want to vote no. But I can imagine a world where basically a limited number of them say to the White House, you don't have the votes. These four are going to vote no if we have to. I'd put Cornyn as a possible no, Todd Young as a possible no, because they may just say institutionally, this person shouldn't have the job. Part of why Kennedy's a little bit different, although not entirely. The other four, if you just said to John Cornyn privately, hey, we're thinking of nominating Kristi Noem to run Homeland Security, or Hegseth to run the Pentagon, or Matt Gaetz to be Attorney General, he'd say no, that you shouldn't pick that person. That person, in my view, is not qualified. Doesn't mean they won't eventually vote yes. But I think people like Todd Young and Cornyn, if it comes to it, particularly if they really try to dabble in recess appointments, may just say, bridge too far for us, Mr. President, we'll work with you on other things, but we're not voting. Would Thune stand in the way of that? My guess is no. My guess is he's again, I don't want to criticize him, and I don't want to predict entirely what he'll do. But he's a pretty mellow guy. He's not like a huge like Tom DeLay enforcer. And if these senators who are his friends and who are in some cases older than him and know their states better than he does, if they say they're voting no, my prediction right now is he's not going to slam them against the wall with Susie Wiles and say, you're voting yes. That's be my sense.
But
Sean,
I think, though, two things to consider. One, Cornyn's up in 26. So again, and he has said he plans to run. So that would end, in my opinion, in Texas, if he were to come up and say, I'm not. But the other issue for Thune, and it's the same issue for Hakeem Jeffries. Thune and Jeffries draw their strengths from the middle of their conference and caucus, respectively. It is their flanks that they have to worry about. And if you're John Thune, do you want to start your leadership with the natives, both in the White House, online, and in your party, restless that you refuse to fight, that you allowed the conference? Because Trump's going to say you let the conference split. Whatever the reality is, he's going to look at him. I don't think Thune would survive if he did not go all out, unless Trump says we're cutting bait. That he has to do it just the way Hakeem is very worried about the left flank, because they're both young. They both want to be in those jobs for a while.
Yeah, look,
Cornyn could retire too.
Yeah, totally.
Well, that's it. If Cornyn votes no, he's retiring. That's your tell.
Yeah.
There's no way that guy votes. He would be primaried and lose. Done. Full stop. Let me just throw out a scenario that I think I think is interesting, because timing matters in all of this, right? So DeSantis put out a statement saying, hey, Marco Rubio is assuming the position of Secretary of State. He assumes, and I think rightly so, he'll be a confirmed day one. That's generally, they get the national security spots are always queued up to go first, regardless of what you will. And he's a current member of the club, so they'll jam him through. That being said, the timing of Gaetz matters. If Gaetz were to go down, he is no longer a member of the House, and he's walking around going, God, I got to go somewhere now. And Ron DeSantis, who has been a friend of his in the past, and the Trump world says, hey, you're buddies with Gaetz. We have a vacancy now. We're going to make you a senator. You don't think that's not going to be in the back of the mind of some senators saying, if we don't put him at the Department of Justice, he may end up in our house?
Yep. Lisa, thank you for joining. Great question. Very much appreciate it. And thanks to everybody with their hands up. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Very grateful to you. Please come back, raise them again. Tonight, 6 o'clock Eastern time, again, Dan and I will be hosting one of the great voices in the Democratic Party, thinking about the future in a positive and optimistic way. Richie Torres, Congressman from New York, and then Ann Seltzer will be here to talk about her Iowa poll. And then tomorrow morning, we'll be back Friday on Two-Way Tonight, two of the other best pollsters in America, and Celinda Lake and Ed Goaz will be here to talk about their battleground poll that's looking at the electorate in a way to try to bring the country together. You'll enjoy that as well. There's something else I wanted to promote. Oh, I know what it is. If you need to hear more from me, in 6 minutes, I'll be on with Michael Smerconish on Sirius XM. So you can switch over to that if you want to hear more of what I have to say. Spoiler alert, I'm going to repeat a lot of what I said here. Guys, when and where should we do our next live show? What do you think? Live and in-person show.
Vegas, Hawaii.
Vegas. There is a comedy cellar.
Jakarta.
There is a comedy cellar in Vegas. I see Los Angeles up there. I'm not kidding around. If you want us to come to your hood, and you got a venue, and you can guarantee you build a crowd, we'll come. We'll be happy to be there.
Crash somewhere.
Yeah, need a place to sleep. In addition, I got some inquiries last night, so I'll say again, if you're interested in investing in Two-Way, a platform that's going to expand beyond politics to other verticals, including personal health, personal finance, sports, music, etc., contact us. Our first round is closing, but if you're a professional investor and you're interested in being part of helping the company grow, please feel free to reach out. I'll see you in a few minutes on Smerconish. I'll see you at 6 o'clock tonight, and the three of us will be back tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern time, because if it's 9 a.m. Eastern time, Sean,
it's the morning
program. And we may have a Treasury Secretary by then. My phone is, as they say in the vernacular, blowing up, because some people loved what I said about the Treasury Secretary and some did not. See you at 6 o'clock. Thanks, everybody.